Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm B.
And I'm Zach.
And this week we read chapters 25 and 26 of The Lost Hero.
Yeah, it was these two chapters, these Jason chapters. I feel like nothing got accomplished at all, but we did, I guess, get some new info dumpy stuff. But that's about it.
Yeah, there was a lot of traveling from one place to another, and yeah, there was some vision stuff. That's always fun, I guess. I don't think we learned too much that we didn't already know. There was like a few little bits and pieces of information. There was some sort of converging of information between the three characters, though ultimately some of them are hiding some things, so it's like not super helpful, but you know.
B, in like a normal world where Rick Riordan's like, oh yes, these people are going to just read the book all the way through, I'd never think of people reading chapters by chapters and slowly breaking them down. It would work in a normal sense, but because we do our show our way, like we kind of already know the stuff.
Yeah, these two chapters as isolated chapters, you're like, okay, well nothing has happened. Because it's like really the point A from point B, you know, stretch, because we just came from the Cyclopses, and then I guess Jason wakes up, and I briefly thought that it was going to be like an overlap where we were going to get his like weird sort of muffled perspective of what happened with the Cyclopses while he's like half passed out, but instead we get his vision mainly while that's all happening, and then him waking up on Festus being like, what happened? And then them in Chicago, which I'm glad at least we moved temporally in time, like enough to like see what Chicago is do. You know what I mean? Like I was afraid that it would like linger too much, like both in Detroit and with them on Festus, where I was like, okay, can we like move along a little bit? Because we already saw all this.
Luckily, we have that luxury now of having multiple point of views where you can have like these time skips almost, where if one character passes out of some sort of like is incapacitated, you can have those luxuries of having a time skip between chapters, which for me, I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, because we already know what happened when he was passed out.
When it comes to this series, at least, it doesn't have to focus on like a linear timeline almost for this, whereas like Percy Jackson also has that thing where like you have like the shoe leather moments where like he falls asleep, let's say, I think in The Lightning Thief on the train, we already got to where we get to go.
Right, he just drifts off and then they're like already there. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's kind of what happens here, but like we also already got the background of like what was happening while he was like wildly hallucinating about stuff about Hera and everything.
Yeah, and I think most of the important stuff happens while he is like knocked out and hallucinating, where he has kind of like this conference with Juno on like ye olde Skype almost, and we'll get towards it. But B, what is the name of the chapter?
The name of the chapter, I just like went with I guess the silliest thing that came to my mind, which is Jason goes on a shopping spree. Though I guess technically speaking, probably the next couple chapters is going to involve said shopping spree, but this is kind of what my brain produced.
I have a bad feeling that I already know what the name of the next chapter will be because it's going to be a Piper chapter. You want to know what I think it's going to be, most likely?
What, like a musical montage of her getting a makeup?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, like in the 80s. No, it's going to be probably, Piper, let's get some shoes.
Oh, no. I don't want that.
These
shoes are $500. Does anybody get that? Is that a thing that anybody remembers?
It's too old, but I would probably be like, Piper thinks these shoes suck. Well, I think we've horribly dated ourselves.
Yeah, let's just completely reveal that we are but crypt keepers. At least compared to like whatever 12-year-olds are listening to this who are like, what are you talking about? But yeah, I guess that's like not a super significant part of the chapters just because it's really not until the end of the second chapter. But we'll get to that because we still have to do the summaries of both of these.
Luckily, these summaries are very, very easy. So the first chapter that we read with Jason is Jason kind of is hallucinating a little bit. He got clunked in the head.
Yeah, is it a dream? Is it a vision? It's whatever happens when, you know, these demigods are like, they close their eyes for 5 seconds and they start to see some stuff.
Yeah, so we have like this vision where Jason's in the middle of the woods and he doesn't really know what's going on here except that he is kind of talking to Juno/Hera, who is in a cage. And she keeps telling him cryptic, mysterious things like, oh, we had to do this. This was a dangerous risk. We had to have an exchange of some sort. He's like, what the heck is happening? But luckily, Jason wakes up and we find out that they're almost to Chicago. Actually, they are in Chicago because they are flying there, and hopefully nothing bad will befall them while they are looking for the Venti as they touch down pretty much in a park. And that's kind of like where the chapter kind of ends.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. We get some background stuff in this vision. Like, again, Hera isn't exactly very forthcoming when it comes to information, especially to Jacen, because apparently in this chapter she mentions something about how the reason his memories are erased is to protect him, and that's why he survived so long. Just a lot of like real cryptic stuff still, you know. There's a mention of a few kind of weird things. We get a little bit of an explanation about what was going on with Zeus / Juno, right? Or no, she was Juno. Jupiter, so he's Jupiter as well. So that's
Jupiter.
His Roman.
I'm about to say Juniper, but that's completely wrong.
Yeah, no, Juniper is a berry. Also, wait, is Juniper also the name of Grover's love interest? I feel like
Yes.
Isn't that her name? Yeah. Anyway, yeah, because it's like a berry, so it's like nature. Not talking about Juniper. Jupiter, aka Zeus, and Hera, aka Juno. It's complicated. There's some sort of explanation for like why he closed Olympus. There's some sort of like theory he has that the reason like this stirring or whatever is happening with all of these monsters is that gods are too involved in the affairs of mortals and in the lives of the demigods, and that it's probably been caused by this promise that they made to claim all of their demigod children. So like, I don't even know if this is true, but oops, when you think that that's the thing that'll solve everything, maybe it's making things worse. We don't know.
Well, I think maybe because Percy Jackson almost accidentally disrupted the status quo in a way where it's like destroying the natural order of things. Like, I always think like the Cartoon Network episode of like Billy and Mandy where they get Mandy to smile and it destroys the fabric of space and time a little bit because it's not something that's not meant to happen.
Yeah, it's like a butterfly effect kind of thing. I was kind of more just thinking that like maybe that's not true and Zeus is just a jerk and doesn't like that he has to claim his kids. I know that that's like maybe me being biased from like reading Percy Jackson and being so annoyed at like how uninvolved the gods were with their kids' lives. And like, I feel like if Zeus were to be right, then that kind of justifies a lot of like the bad behavior that gods have. And I feel like, I don't know, either you shouldn't have kids because you can't be involved in their lives because it'll like ruin the space-time continuum and cause like a bunch of monsters to appear, or like if you do, you should claim them. But I don't know, I don't really like this sort of position that Zeus is taking where it's like, oh, I'm gonna have kids, but claiming them ruins everything. And it's like, I don't really know if you're just saying that because you're kind of a deadbeat jerk.
And the funny thing is like as we explore this chapter a lot, like Juno kind of even talks about like gods have like a weird thing, like they don't really have like the idea of like oneself almost, where it's like they don't have a conscience. Like there's weird things that they have.
Right, they don't have a conscience. Yeah, they don't have any sort of internal.
They don't have like this clear understanding of what they're doing. That's like they don't have almost like built-in common sense, or they don't have like, maybe because they've lived for thousands of years, or even let's just say almost hundreds of thousands.
Did Juno say something like they don't have like sort of a moral compass, I guess, like any kind of thing directing them to do the right thing, which like, ooh, that's scary because they have a lot of power.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, again, if you live for so long, you see like these weird like vides for power, especially like if we look at different civilizations, every different civilization has different types of morality. Like you could look at the Greeks had this thing, like you could look at like the Romans, you could look at like the French, you could look at the British, and they all have like different types of morality that are like judged differently based off of like what culture they are.
Yeah, like the culture of the gods. That's also complicated too, because I think because the gods like have no perception of time, to them like tradition like matters more to them or something. So like they are just like, oh, this is the way we've always done it. It's fine. I don't know. It's hard to like judge exactly if like Zeus is telling the truth or if he actually has like an ulterior motive for being like, yeah, it's us being nice to our kids that's causing the apocalypse.
Is it also the possibility of, because it's like an amalgamation of like, because they move with Western civilization, so they're adopting newer things, that it's almost like there's like too many cooks in the kitchen, like they don't even know like what up is down is at times, because they have like conflicts of like what is right and what is just, or like even
I'm not
like
sure
there's that
what's
problem
going
with
on.
it, isn't it? Because we have this thing, especially like in Civilization, if we look at the Greeks, how they handled their children. Like if we look at the Spartans, it'd be like, well, you're a nice strapping lad. Well, your initiation is here's a knife. Don't die for a
Go
couple
kill.
days and you come back. Yeah, and make sure to kill like a wolf or something and bring it back with you. Or you have like the Romans, which were a little different, where it was like, we're gonna like pamper and nurture you. You can all go to like the gymnasium and stuff, and well, eventually you either like become super rich or super poor. There's nothing in between. Unless you're a citizen, that means it's weirder things.
Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious that like the culture of like demigods is based on like these weird like ancient traditions of kind of expecting a lot from children and not really like, you know, parenting them in the like modern sense that we think of parenting, and maybe that has to do with how the gods act. I also think about like the construction of like what childhood means and stuff, which like definitely didn't exist in like ancient Greece. Like they were just like, a child is like a small adult that can do less work for you. Like, I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it.
There's also this thing as well as like with demigods, or at least with like having like a huge vast family, is something that's until recently has been a huge thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'm like the 17th son of like a 17th son. So it's like these weird things where it's like you have backup children almost, where it's like after a while the parents stop caring about their kids. Like, oh, they can help us on the farm and stuff. Whereas you can easily apply that to the gods. Like, oh, they can help us go on quests and give us monies and stuff and give us tributes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll find out more as to like whether Zeus was right, but that whole thing that happened kind of spurs, it's sort of like pretty common as a storytelling like trope where in trying to prevent a bad thing from happening, you kind of cause another bad thing to happen, because in, I guess, Zeus deciding to close off Olympus, that makes Hera go, oh wait, I know what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go here, and then she gets trapped. So like she kind of, in kind of defying him, ends up getting kidnapped, and obviously by a powerful force, because it's not easy for her to be trapped.
And if you look at this from like a storytelling perspective of like Rick Riordan, is that he's getting the Greek gods completely out of the way because they've closed off Mount Olympus. So if we are going towards the Roman forms, do the Romans say no to anything? Like, are they having the same type of like cautiousness?
Yeah, I'm not, we still haven't quite like spelled out the mechanics of how that all works, where it's like they're not really discrete beings, as more they're like sort of like facets of the same being that are a little bit different. Like in the vision that Jason has, she like sort of flickers, and then he briefly sees her Juno form, where she's like this sort of like warrior, which is like very different than Hera, where she even says like, oh, if I was just Hera, I would have just listened to him, but I'm also Juno and I like defied him in this way. And it's like those are her sort of like her more, I guess, assertive facet of her personality is this sort of essence of Juno that lives within her, just as the essence of Hera also does. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting like conversation that they have, because they have like this back and forth about kind of like the gods' will versus the demigods' will, almost, where it's like the only reason why Jason's allowed to almost live is because she did like a hard reset on his brain, thus that he doesn't know anything, so he's allowed to be in camp without having any weird threats. What do you think about that, B? I feel like this is bad, real bad.
Yeah, so we kind of get the sense that like Hera intentionally sent Jason to Camp Half-Blood, but like it kind of is like stirring up the natural order of things. This seems to be a theme here. We're like, okay, we already know that he's like somehow associated with Rome. We've already heard about this kid in the purple shirt. There's like something going on here where like she's kind of like trying to bridge the gap between Roman and Greek gods and like how they function, I guess, and like I guess they're equivalent demigods. He kind of explains that in the next chapter when he's like conferring all of this information to Piper and Jason, and it's kind of like, I don't know, we don't exactly know what this means yet, because again, it's like the very convenient Rick Riordan thing of like, I'm trying to tell you a thing, but I have to go and I'm fading away, and like, I know, wait, I feel like I've made this reference before, but like, you know, like in Halloween Town when like the grandma is being frozen, and she's just like, be careful, it's just a spell that freezes us, or whatever. And like, that's kind of what happens here, where she doesn't like really get all the words out. And of course, Jason comes to his senses just enough to like, just enough to like ask a few key questions about like, wait a second, like why is this? And like she's kind of trying to answer it, but like gets cut off because she's like, oh, also here's a convenient thing that I won't be powerful enough to talk to you even in your dreams. I'm going away now. And you're like, okay, great. Thank you for this unhelpful information.
Well, especially like there's a lot of themes as well about how the ground itself is pretty much pure evil. Like we get this with like Leo's stuff. We get this especially now. It's like she keeps bringing up, oh, the ground is stirring, it's evil, and this is why I got put into the spooky cage, but we had to have the exchange. What type of exchange do you think this possibly could be? Is it like a business exchange? You think, okay, I'll trade you 3 kids for 1 idiot.
Yeah. Like a quid pro quo. Yeah, like I don't know. That's like kind of what I was thinking too, where it's like, is he like being traded in for like another demigod? It's really not very clear, but of course it's like cut off to the point where like it's almost less helpful than if he hadn't heard that at all, because it's just completely contextless. You're like, what does that mean in exchange? She like, you know, yeah, she specifically calls him a bridge. So like what I'm thinking is there's some sort of like way in which he's functioning as a connection between Greek and Roman, but I like don't really know like the backstory of why that's important or why she made that call. She kind of like insists that his memory erasing is also like a part of why he's survived this long, but like that doesn't make sense to him, and which will become clear in the next chapter. Yeah, there's just like a lot that he can't really find out about.
So he's like the Iron Giant. The second he realizes who he is, he's gonna start shooting like laser beams out of his eyes and stuff, and start destroying Camp Half-Blood. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, like this is kind of par for the course for these books, where like we know that this kind of has already happened already, and it does feel a little bit frustrating that like this idea that like these events sort of have this cyclical nature. Like the way that the demigods and the monsters and everything work is, oh, well, then the Titan War happens, and because of the effects of that, there's always going to be this other thing that happens that then stirs monsters and whatever and tricks Hera into getting trapped, and it's like, whoop, it's all over again, exactly what has happened before.
It kind of reminds me a lot of like the Wheel of Time, and how in that series history keeps repeating itself because time is just a gigantic wheel where we have events rehappening maybe in different ways, especially if we look at Percy Jackson. Like, for the love of Pete, like mythologies keeps redoing the exact same stories over and over again.
Yeah, like it's by the book. I mean, maybe not exactly, but we already know, like literally, like the Sea of Monsters almost like verbatim follows a hero's journey that has already happened. Like it's pretty like beat for beat, like, okay, we expect these things to happen. So like, I don't know, sometimes I think about that, and when I'm reading these books and I'm like, is this like a purposeless venture that they're like, it's like futile to even stop these things? Because like fighting the Titan War, they felt like they had to do that, but ultimately they probably should have known that they were causing these other things to happen because it's happened before. So I kind of like wonder, like maybe that's why Chiron in general has always been so tight-lipped about like prophecies and what things are to come, because he's like lived this life where he's seen the cyclical nature of things happening and knows they're inevitable and can't really stop them. So like, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. It's like when it comes to like history, it's like if we don't look back at history, we're just doomed to repeat it in many ways. Whereas like,
yeah,
when we look at these stories, like these are, passed through the oral tradition where like they all pretty much have the same purpose, but you say them a little differently. Sometimes you might change the entire outcome, though. Is it like if Kronos one would the same process still work, where pretty much Zeus would come back and destroy the Titans? Like there's a lot of like self-destructive natures. Like no matter what happens, there's going to be this cycle where like there's going to be some like higher being of some sort that takes control, vies for power, then gets toppled by another power.
It really does get me thinking about like the significance of the actions in these kind of books, like the fact that we went through the whole process of reading Percy Jackson. I'm like, is that really for naught? Like, does that even matter necessarily that they quote unquote like changed the sort of culture and caused this like upheaval in the way things were done? They made the gods promise that they would claim their kids, but ultimately that's what would cause the destruction of everything else. Like, is there like no way to actually enact like meaningful positive change in this like ecosystem because it's built upon like functioning in a specific way, and no matter what you do, like kind of like most time travel stories where like the more you resist stopping like the thing that you think is going to happen, you actually end up causing it to happen. And I don't know if that's like how it works in this world, or if there is like this sense of free will actually. Like it's hard to say.
See, isn't that like the great debate, isn't it? It's like, if we even look at like the Enlightenment period of history, where it's like the great debate was like, do we actually have free will? Is it something that, you know, God bestows us, or is it something that we're set on like a predetermined path no matter what? Whereas I choose to believe that what Percy Jackson did was actually a very positive thing. Like, no matter what happens in life, like if you have a huge impactful thing, there's always going to be some type of like, you know, lashback, or there's going to always be some type of problem that's going to occur with like people trying to oppose this and try to like go back to the status quo. We see this time and time again throughout history. Like someone gets deposed or something bad happens, and it's like, we miss the old ways.
Yeah, because like especially the way that like Zeus insists that it must be this thing that they made us do that actually like holds us accountable. It just feels very much like just reminiscent of like every other excuse to not be progressive that's ever existed, where it's like, oh well, we should stick to the status quo because it's worked before, and you know, you trying to shake things up, that's what caused the problem. And it like doesn't feel sincere, especially because it obviously would require Zeus and the other gods to actually be responsible and good. And like, I don't know, it just feels like there has to be something more than that.
Well, every time like they have like a positive change or something that's very progressive, you're always going to have the problem with people that are like so entwined with like, I want to keep it the same way, I'm too afraid of change. They're going to take 2 step backs before they take 3 steps forward almost at times. It's like we see this time and time again with no matter what's going on, even if we look at right now with like what's happening, you're always going to have those people that like fight back.
Oh, I mean, always. Yeah. Social progress. I think it's like this sort of like ratcheting effect where like in trying to push towards like progress and change and like sort of, you know, disrupting whatever traditions that might not serve you anymore, you inherently create a backlash where it's like, oh, but actually you fighting against this, you're making things worse because you're rocking the boat. And like, that's what I feel like Zeus is trying to articulate. And I really don't want the narrative to confirm that he was right. Like, oh, all along, this is what caused this. Because then it kind of like is like a weird lesson to teach also, like, because yeah, this is fiction. So you're deciding whether or not that's true. And it's like kind of a bizarre thing to like indicate to children is true. Like, oh yeah, well they tried to fix it, but ultimately that actually was a bad thing and they should have just stayed the same. And like, I don't know, maybe I'm like getting too cerebral about it, but it just like didn't sit well with me. I mean, that's kind of why Hera is like, this is ridiculous, and like follows a voice in her head, which to be fair was also dumb, and she even admits that.
Well, here's the thing, especially like if we look at Jason and within this chapter, like Jason's kind of like the bridge. This is why like Hera / Juno is doing the thing she's doing, is to kind of like create, like, if this is supposed to be the thing, like the change is going to be, you have to work through it. Like, you know, even like the road to hell is paved through good intentions at times, where if you create like a bridge of some sort, especially like, let's say Jason is from Rome, or, you know, he has to have his memory wiped in this way, maybe having the old way being torn down this way of like, this is pretty much like the death throes of like Zeus is like, I don't want to change, no, but
kicking and screaming.
Literally kicking and screaming, but this ancient enemy of some sort has come back, and now they have to work together, and it turns out him kicking and screaming and making everything worse is going to have to rely on his children, like all the demigods.
That was what really caused all this to happen, right? Because if he wasn't acting like a jerk, then Hera probably wouldn't have listened to the voice in her head, because she was like, oh, well, this will protect us. And then obviously that was also a trap. So they were kind of like falling to their own worst impulses in those examples. So they both maybe didn't make the best decisions. Also, I think it's kind of buck wild that like Hera could be tricked again when, like I said, this has happened before. So it's like, it's sort of, do they live so long that they kind of like lose perspective that there obviously is going to be a moment, especially within the context of like, oh, another Titan War happened, where she should have sort of predicted that she would have been tricked into getting captured again? Like, do they not understand history?
I don't think it's history, more as like storytelling, where they're just always going to be in this position where they have to fall into like story elements. Like a good example of this is I always think of like Wile E. Coyote and like the Roadrunner, where like they're always going to be destined to fight each other.
They just have to do that. Yeah.
There's always going to be the part of the Roadrunner like literally like runs on the air and the coyote is going to like, you know, step 2 feet into the air, look down and go, "Welp,"
and hold up a sign that says "Yikes."
Yeah, like exactly. Like you literally have that moment here, especially like if you look at. There's always going to be like that pattern against like the turning of the wheel. Like,
yeah, but you like, I feel like you expect more from the gods, but then I remember like just because they're gods doesn't mean they function as like all-knowing beings the way that like we might in the West try to conceptualize of a god. Like they're supposed to be pretty fallible and like sort of not human, but I guess they have like, you know, selfish or not well thought out impulses that are not just like all knowing, all seeing, all magnanimous or whatever.
Well, here's the thing, and that is like all the gods have hubris to the max because they have these powers that literally like they can turn into their godly form and turn people into like literal pillars of salt and stuff. Where it's like, how are you able to like trap a god and stuff? Well, you have to fall into these old conventions that they fell for millennia ago almost, where it's like, ooh, a piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of candy. Like you have to like fall into like those trappings.
Yeah, it just kind of cracks me up because it really feels like on the one hand you want to like defer to them as like these ultimate experts and they're supposed to know all these things, and then they're like, oops, I made the same mistake I did. It's like, yeah, I repeat mistakes too, like many humans do, but I'm also not like, you know, thousands of years old, you know, all powerful being in the sky.
Well, I also think that when it comes down to tradition, more it's like old timey, like ghost peer pressure at times, where it's just you do these things, but also at the same time, tradition is something that's built up basically kind of like, oh, why do we not eat this certain thing? Why do we like, you know, in the wintertime we do this certain thing? Because thousands of years ago our ancestor did it. It was very effective. But after thousands of years of like innovation and stuff, you kind of forget like, why is it the way that we did it rather than just pure tradition at times? Like, I feel like that might also be the case where it's like, the gods, almost because they live for thousands of years, tend to forget the very, very, you know, basic past, and they're so used to like the current future that they don't understand that the traps that they fell for might be like relevant again. Like I feel like that might also be the thing. Like they're so caught up right now in the now, they're not worried about like 2,000 or 3,000 years in the past at times. Who knows? Maybe that might be the case.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we're sort of just talking in circles, but it's
an interesting conversation.
I'm kind of interested. I know, it's funny. We're like, how could they keep repeating themselves? And it's like, we're repeating ourselves about how they're repeating ourselves. But it's just like, I don't know. I want to expect better from them, even though that's like ridiculous.
But that's pretty much like when it comes to this chapter, there isn't really much to it because it's Jason kind of waking up and being like, oh, how long was I out and stuff. But like if we talk about like these little things, like right here is what's so fascinating. It's almost like the metaphysical stuff when it comes to Percy Jackson that we just find so interesting. Like people want to talk about like, oh, like what's the relationship between Piper and Jason, but yet we like this type of stuff, which for me I find to be so much more interesting because you can talk about the stuff. I think that's the great thing about Rick Riordan's work is that you can actually like talk about like both the physical, the metaphysical, and the minutia of it, where Rick Riordan gives you that ability, especially like the world building is so fantastic here that it's great.
But at the same time, also the world building is like based in mythology you already know, and I always kind of like wonder how it actually works, where like how much of like existing mythology is incorporated into like what his vision is, and like we said, like so much of what happens like reflects literal events that already exist in mythology, and I always like wonder like when he conceived of this world, like how much of that is like built into the fabric, like no matter what, these specific events are destined to happen, and like how much of it is like, okay, actually what these heroes do matter. And it really is interesting when you're like, we're tasked with the job of like reading the story and trying to like find meaning in it. I'm like, am I losing all the meaning because I feel like no matter what they do, these things are going to happen? I don't know.
Well, I think one of the problems, especially when it comes to like Rick Riordan, is he's teaching kids infotainment. So he's trying to teach these kids the myths. And by doing that, we're falling into the trap. He has to fall into those traps.
Right. So he has to do that too. Now we're getting kind of meta too, right? Because of course he has to repeat all of these things that have actually happened in Greek mythology mythology, because that gives him a platform to specifically describe when it happened in those stories. So like I get like the sort of meta function of that. So yeah, I guess I didn't really step back and think like, oh, of course he has to do that. But then the net effect is that we have to like wonder, does this keep happening forever in perpetuity? And like it doesn't matter. I don't know.
For me, in my brain, I just imagine, like, if Rick Riordan ever listens to this, and if you do, hey, I'm just imagining him listening to us talk about this and be like, wow, you guys are going real too deep there, everybody. We're just having a fun time.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't think of it that way. I just wanted to teach kids about the Titan War.
Yeah. So are you ready to talk about the next summary, B?
I sure am.
So Jason wakes up, and they're flying to Chicago, and pretty much this is where everyone has almost a heart-to-heart. Piper and Jason kind of have a talk. He talks about enchiladas.
Enchiladas! They say enchiladas, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, they did. They did, and I love that.
I was like, okay, so we're on the same page here, Leo.
So they make it to kind of Chicago, and what happens is like, oh, we should go to this building over there, but, you know, the Ventir are there, so they kind of touch down in the park, and this is kind of like where they have a lot of their heart-to-hearts as Leo starts making them some amazing tacos in the snow, and they kind of have like a fun time, really, but at the same time, they're getting urged to go into the sewer system, which they do, where they end up meeting a mysterious proprietor of a shop that shouldn't exist in the sewers, but yet it's almost like Macy's, but not.
Yeah, so this is giving me flashbacks to like Auntie M and a variety of other seemingly friendly characters.
Oh, you mean Cersei?
Yeah, or yeah, that too, Cece as well, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're a little bit too friendly, but I'm seeing some spooky stuff flickering in your face, so this can't be good. This is really related a lot to like the tension we've talked about, where there isn't a lot of actual fighting in this story, and I guess in general, our characters tend to avoid fighting more. I feel like that's like in their character, where Percy is like the kind of person who like solves a problem with a sword. For whatever reason, these three characters combined, they're much more likely to like negotiate or sort of try to talk their way out of it, especially Piper, obviously. But even Jason and Leo, too, their first impulse isn't to cause destruction. Even Leo, who has freaking fire powers in his hands, he's not like just setting things on fire at a moment's notice, which is kind of interesting. But in this case, it's sort of like their impulse to try to avoid conflict might maybe best them, because they're trying to avoid, you know, actually getting aggressive with this woman, but ultimately things just don't feel right, you know?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with like the teenage aspects of this book. This is more of a teenage focused book. So like things that teenagers like are going to be a lot different than like a middle grade book like Percy Jackson at times, where it's like teenagers like conflict. They like drama. Like a good example of this is actually reading Goosebumps books by R.L. Stine and then reading Fear Street books, where the horror is a lot different. The horror from a Fear Street book is more realistic, like a teenager with a knife, compared to like Goosebumps, where it's like, oh, a space creature or like an egg monster or something, where it's like more scary as you're a teenager because you find things to be more horrifying realistically, because you're understanding the world is like I don't want to say it's like a grim, dark place, but you understand like this is where like you realize almost your common sense comes through. It's like, if I fall off 12 feet, I'm most likely going to hurt myself. Whereas when you're a kid and you fall off 12 feet, you're going to jump up and do that again because it was fun.
Well, yeah, there's also, you know, if you're a 12-year-old and you're all of a sudden finding out that you're a demigod, you're like, yeah, sick, I get a sword. And then, like, if you're, like, 16, you're like, I got, like, all these teen feelings and, like, I just want to, like, you know, negotiate with people and talk things out with people. Like, it makes sense that, like, if you're a kid, you're way more, like, problem focused and, like, a sort of, like, oh, I'll just, like, fight my way out of it. Well, like, you know, you're a bit more diplomatic, I think, when you're older. That might be kind of what's happening here, both in, like, a meta way of like, oh, older would want to read that, and also older characters would act that way. I'm not sure. Again, also the function of the story that we talked about with the monsters reforming, is it even like beneficial in this story for them to like endlessly be like slashing their way through monsters that'll just like respawn in a second? I don't know if that's even, you know, useful.
We see a good example of this actually when like Piper and Leo start to kind of talk about some of their issues, especially like Enceladus and also Leo's fire powers. As a teenager, it's almost like, wow, they took this really well compared to Percy Jackson, when we see things with like Rachel and like Annabeth, where it's like they're almost gonna like murder each other just for the sheer thought of being like, how dare they hang out with me type of mentality, whereas here it's different.
Well, yeah, they also are a little bit more mature, obviously, but yeah, they have different problems. It is interesting, though, that, like, Leo is so ashamed of his fire powers, and ultimately they're, like, talking about it and go, like, yeah, but I have, like, lightning powers, and she can, like, you know, persuade people, so, like, you're no weirder than either of us. So it's, like, a lot more level-headed, like, oh, right, I guess we're not so different after all.
Well, even with like that conversation, the great thing about it is Jason almost flips the idea. It's like everyone's so worried about like a person with fire powers in Hephaestus' cabin, they don't think, wait, are the people that have fire powers, they're there when they're needed the most rather than they're the ones causing the destruction. Like he actually has like almost like a different point of view of it, which is something especially with these types of stories now where you're older, you can look at things from a certain point of view or a different point of view.
Right, yeah, because I think that like Percy always conceived of his powers like, yeah, this is sort of my get out of jail free card. It's sort of like very much functioned as like his, you know, ejector button that like no matter what situation he was in, he could always like have that as an option to like, you know, get out of a sticky situation. Well, I think especially Leo, obviously because of his tragic past, the way he sort of says, oh, well, you know, it's not always a blessing. It's not always a good thing to have this. And then because Jason is perceptive, and again, that might have to do with his age and his like experience. He's like, oh, I know you're talking about what happened with your mom. They're able to sort of like read and understand like, okay, this isn't just like, yeah, heck yeah, I could just set things on fire. They actually understand like the weight and responsibility of having those abilities, you know?
This actually brought up a very interesting thought, especially with like Percy Jackson. His powers are, you know, water based. Like I remember like I would spill water sometimes. My grandfather like, well, at least it's water, it'll just evaporate. Whereas like when it comes to fire powers, it's different. Like you can't just go willy-nilly with the fire powers.
Yeah, I guess that's true. The essence of the powers might also have to do with it. But I feel like in general, though, they all have complicated relationships to their powers, especially Leo and Piper, because Piper is also like super weirded out and ashamed of her ability to persuade people because she feels like it's like insincere, and like it so much of her identity as a child of Aphrodite is her conflict of like her personality where she wants to be the most genuine and the most sincere, and she doesn't want to like, you know, put on airs or dress up for people or be anything that she isn't. And on the other hand, she has this impulse to like sort of, you know, chameleon herself to like get what she wants because she has that ability. And it's like, you know, they have a lot of internal conflicts when it comes to their abilities and like powers as versus a lot of Percy Jackson characters that were just like, yeah, this is awesome.
I feel like what Rick Riordan's kind of doing here as well is he's almost making like the personification of like teenage problems, especially like teenage girl. I want to be myself, but you know, society has like this expectation for me because, you know, I'm a child of Aphrodite. I have to be pretty and cute and stuff. Whereas when it comes to like Jason, he's still trying to like figure out who he is. I mean, he doesn't have his memories, but yet he has like these great superpowers. Like look at it from like a person that like does sports a lot. Like he's trying to figure out who he is, but yet is he doing sports because he wants to do sports, or is it sports because his parents want him to do sports? And then you look at like Leo, who's just trying to fit in. He's someone that's like slipped through the cracks of society in this way, where it's like he was lost in the system. And it's like, what do you do in that situation? Do you make the best out of your powers, or do you make the best out of like trying to fit in? Because he has this problem of like when he gets close to people, his trauma like triggers it in a way where like he just runs away, and it's easier for him to like keep running and not get attached to people compared to like all the other people. And it's interesting that you look at it that way. Like all these powers are just like the personifications of like teenage fears at times, which for me is utterly fascinating, especially when you have these people all together where like, again, I think I say this all the time. It's like, what truly makes a family? Is it like the blood bond, or is it just the people that you hang out with? And it's like, these people are my family. Like blood doesn't have to be family necessarily at times.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting how they view magic and all of this stuff as like, it's a little bit less like a whimsical escape from their life and more like, oh, yet another annoying thing I have to deal with, you know, which again might be the angsty teen thing too. In general, their little conversation is interesting because it does feel like they communicate a little bit more than like characters in the past we've encountered, while also like having certain things they have to keep secret. I'm glad that Leo finally talked about his fire abilities, but also, like, I guess he had to because he had to use them. But in this case, Piper's still kind of, like, being withholding because we know all of the stuff about her dad. Though we do know that, at the very least, he's in danger, but she can't talk about it, which is kind of a rough scene that we encounter when Jason's trying to, like, sort of, you know, sort of eke that information out of her where it's like, hey, there's something, your dad is in danger, right? What's that about? And then she starts to cry, and, like, we really don't ever get more information out of her than that. And then, you know, Leo is like, hey, I made tacos, and you're like, okay, let's just, like, get distracted from that.
Well, for me, I like this kind of scene where it's like these two types of extremes, especially like you're getting it from Jason's point of view, who at this point is kind of like falling in love with Piper. This is going to be one of those like, will they, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they're both into each other. It's very much like this sort of this inevitable thing where they're like, no matter what universe we're in, we're meant to be. Well, it's like sort of like that sort of like soulmate AU like type of trope where like they're meant to be together because even if that was like a false memory of the mist, they want to be together anyway.
And it's something that happens, and again, like we look at these point of views, like this is going to be a thing that happens in teenage books. There's going to be the part they like go googly eye for each other, and then you have the part with Leo, which I absolutely love. The same where they're just making tacos and having fun, but Leo's self-aware enough, like, oh, these are like tofu tacos and stuff, and they're like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was really sweet. That was such like a nice friend moment where he's like, oh, I know you're vegetarian, so I made it this way. And it's like, I don't know. They do really feel already like close-knit, like they care about each other. And that like makes some of their internal struggles all the more upsetting because you know that like Piper really doesn't want to betray them. And like that conflict is really present in this scene where like the tension of her like, oh yeah, we're all hanging out. It's very clear that Jason and her are interested in each other. And they're kind of like, you know, he apologizes for what happened with the mist, but is kind of like hinting at the fact that he still likes her. And then, you know, ultimately that she feels very close to them in this scene, but also knows she like can't reveal what's actually happening. Because in his mind, he probably just thinks, oh, she's being sensitive about her dad or whatever. Doesn't realize like ultimately the reason she's not talking about it is because like she has promised to betray them to save him.
For me, is like when you have these tender scenes, this is where it's almost like twisting the knife in while you've already stabbed the person, where it's like you know what's gonna happen. Is it almost like a dash of like dramatic irony at times? Let's like they're being like super like family like knit family, but yet you know one of them has this horrible secret.
Yeah, I feel like you need a scene like that, right, to like really like twist the knife of like a kind of character who you know is going to betray them, or you know is like sort of has conflicting interests happening, because like this whole story is kind of about them getting closer through, you know, the trauma bonding of going on an adventure together.
And it's funny because like we've talked about it as like the joke before, it's like Piper's almost like Selena 2.0 at times, where it's like if we had a POV chapter from like Selena from you know, all of Percy Jackson, it would have been the exact same type of outcome.
It's acknowledged that it's like Selena 2.0. She like literally is like, oh, I just found out about this girl Selena who betrayed everyone. I'm just like her. Like she immediately internalizes that as like, I've also betrayed them. But what she doesn't internalize is that they mostly view her as a hero, except for that horrible girl Drew, who I want to like punt into the sky. I hate her so much. But like ultimately, like most people see Selena as a hero. That was kind of Percy's like important like message to the camp, was like, no, really, she was the hero in all of this. What she did was for heroic reasons. And I think that that's like what Piper's doing too. Like she's doing it to save her dad. And like, it's not like she's just decided to betray people like someone like Luke or whatever, who just like has his own ulterior motives and ends up going to the quote unquote dark side. She's being blackmailed, which isn't the same thing, you know? Or, like, I guess he's being held for ransom, sort of. But it's like that kind of thing. She's under duress.
And I think that's the most important thing, especially with having all these multiple characters now, is that you have that understanding of, like, she's not truly evil. If we have, let's just say, for example, we never had the POV of Piper, and then the twist happens, if it does happen, it'd be like, wow, Piper's awful. But yet, because we know in our brain why she's doing all the things that she's doing, it's more justified. in many ways, especially like I think it's set up in a much better way than what happened with like Selena. Like it's a good plot element in Percy Jackson. It works really well, but we don't have that really good setup or payoff. Whereas here we're getting a really good setup and we might have a very interesting payoff. Like, is it going to come to the solution of like choosing between her friends or her father?
Oh God, I don't even know. Yeah, Selena's different because she's such a different character because we don't get her perspective, and we also don't find out that she is the quote unquote, I guess, what do they call her? Like a spy, I guess, that you find that out at the end. So like ultimately, like you get like, you know, I guess it's, you know, hindsight where you look back at her past behavior and go, oh, that's why she was acting that way. It's because she was the spy. But like in this, you know already that she's going to betray them, which is like a very different kind of perspective. Like, I don't know. You don't get like this whole like new perspective of looking back on her actions and it makes sense. Instead, it's like you think she's going to betray them. Is she? Maybe the conflict instead is you actively holding her hand going, okay, I'm coming with you on this journey. Are you going to betray them? Because I could see this is very hard for you.
The funny thing is, B, it's like it's the exact comparison of like what is the difference between a mystery and a thriller. A mystery is more like you're setting up the clues and you're discovering things, whereas a thriller, you know the quintessential piece, like, oh, the person that's the murderer murdered the person. Yeah, and then it's like, oh, when are they going to get caught?
Right, you know who the murderer is. But instead you're wondering who they're going to kill or whatever. Or it's how it's going to happen, not what's going to happen.
What makes a good thriller isn't like the murder has been happened, but is the person going to get away with it? That's the thing. It's like you're already like rooting for this person in this different way, which for me, I think if we look at Piper, she is a thriller character rather than a mystery character. Like, you know her secret. It's just a matter of time until everyone else figures it out, and she's slipping up already. She's already said enchiladas. Right,
yeah, she revealed that she knows some stuff about the giants and everything. Like it's slipping through the cracks that she knows more than she's letting on. And Jason knows that, right? Because this is coming from his perspective and he thinks, wait a second, she's like not fully revealing what she knows. And it's not just about her dad. Like she knows something about these giants. And it's not just like because she did a lot of research into ancient Greece for a movie one time. Like there's other stuff going on here.
Yeah. And that's kind of the great thing about this, especially with like their ability now of like, Jason's like, oh, we have to go through the spooky sewers because we can get to the Venti because they'll just blow us out of the sky if we have a problem. So, like, even when they end up going into, like, the Macy's, they're like, yeah, this is pretty much a trap. Even, like, the joke is, like, they look at, like, the placard of, like, all the different levels, and each one is, like, crazier than the next. Even it's like, what the heck's a sundry? And I'm like, oh, I wish... I'm like, I remember...
Oh, innocence.
Oh, innocence. Oh, innocence. We're not going to reveal that. Go look into a dictionary. It's going to have a bigger reveal. It's like almost like when people used to put misc. Like I don't know what that was. Oh, it's just miscellaneous.
I mean, that is kind of what a sundry is, right? It's just like it's whatever you could get for a journey, right? Like it's kind of a very vague word.
Well, sundry is like just everything in between that isn't the bare necessities, but yet it's just you might need it. Like who knows? You might need this or that. But they meet this mysterious woman. And I like the description they give of her. She's like middle-aged, but like very elegant. I'm thinking like she has like a transatlantic accent, but not really because they describe her as having like
I don't know if it's transatlantic because
It's mysterious. It's a mysterious accent almost.
Yeah, what is it?
Exotic. That's the word they used again.
Exotic, which is like kind of racially charged to like say exotic accent. I don't really know what that means. I guess exotic as in not coming from here, so it's not an American accent. She says she's foreign. Whatever that means. That could mean a lot of things. Like,
where you from? I'm foreign.
Are you like from this earth? Like, what? Like she's like, I'm not from around here. That's like what every alien says to people in a movie. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no. It's like, where you from? I'm from Earth. Yes, average.
Yes,
Earth human
I'm
man.
a normal human.
Yes, my name is actually Hugh Man. Oh, man. Yeah, so we have this mysterious character, and, man, her name, I keep seeing it as Coachella, but that is completely wrong, and I know that's wrong.
It is definitely not Coachella. She's a queen, though, right? Or a princess?
Is she from the Princess Diaries? Is she from Geneva?
Yeah. Oh, no, Geneva's a real place. Genovia is a fake place.
Genovia. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Geneva is like the Geneva Convention, like, is a place in... Is that in Prague, I want to say. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But Geneva is a real place. Genovia is like a made-up, like, vaguely European country that isn't real.
That everyone knows Julie Andrews rules with, I guess, a nice iron fist. It's very dainty.
With a white-gloved fist. I was just talking about her book podcast today.
Oh, fun.
She has one. It's really good, honestly. It's really more for kids, but I mean, I feel like a lot of people who listen to the show would like it.
But her name is Colchius?
Okay.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Colchis?
Colchis? I want to say Princess of Colchis. What, is Colchis a place?
Nah, she's Coachella.
I'm going to guess it's a Greek island. Let's find out.
It might be a Roman island, too. It might just be a Mediterranean island.
Yeah, I'm going to guess it's an island in the Mediterranean Sea. Let's find out if it is, folks. We're finding it out on the air. Colchis.
Don't look it up, B.
No, well, maybe they'll...
No, don't look it up. You're not allowed to.
Yes, it's a place it's a Greco-Roman geography. It's on the coast of the Black Sea. Okay, so it's not an island, but it is a place.
Yes, it is a place. Now what you need to do is exit out of there real quick.
So I don't get spoiled.
Yeah, this is all live on air.
I know. Listen, I had a feeling it was a place and not like enough of a myth. It is a real physical place that exists, so...
It just says, wait, B, it just says Murder Island with like an angry face.
Murder Island, where they kill people. Oh, oops, okay. It's not an island, I don't think, but it is on the Black Sea.
Is it an archipelago?
I think it's just
Or a peninsula?
I don't know. It's like near the Mediterranean, I want to say. It's in that general area. I didn't look too closely. I didn't want to get spoiled, like you said. They might be like, known for this princess who kills people with her shopping sprees. I don't know. I can't look too closely.
Well, it isn't the shopping spree that kills you. It's all the debt that you incur from all the credit cards you take out.
Yeah, that's the real death, is debt.
Yep. Well, what do you think is going to be happening next chapter? Because they're about to go on a shopping spree.
This doesn't bode well, right? Like, okay, on the one hand, yes, she captured the storm spirits in a little cage. But also...
She has Coach Hedge as well.
She has Coach Hedge in a cage, so she's like... She kind of seems to be this, like, sort of chaotic neutral party where she'll just, like, take whatever she needs for her, like, messed up human store. Like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. That's, like, human trafficking.
It also doesn't help that, like, she blinked and was really interested in the name Jason.
Yeah, I have a feeling that her being like, what an interesting name, especially at a name Jason, that like totally is also a normal human name too. Like it's not just like an ancient Greek association, or I guess ancient Roman. I don't know, but oh yeah, is that Greek?
It's Greek. It's Greek because there's Jason and the Argonauts.
It's Greek. It's Greek. Jason is Greek. Yeah, Jason and the Argonauts. Yeah, that's what I thought. But it's not just that association. It's like a normal guy name. She's like, what an interesting name. It's like, okay, where are you from, girl? I'm thinking we're getting another one of those, like, this is a myth that has happened before, and she's interested in Jason because, like, the actual original Jason that he's named after had met her once upon a time. Because we've had encounters like this before, like when they met Boreas, and then they're like, oh, Jason, like that Jason who is here? And then, of course, it's a different Jason. So, yeah, she seems a little too interested in that. I don't know why Jason tells her their names. I think he's sort of like enraptured by her voice, which kind of also gives me very like spooky vibes, like Cersei or someone else, where it's like they're like a sorceress or like has some sort of magic pull, not unlike Piper, where they're persuading someone with their voice to do something that they probably shouldn't if they were in their right mind. So I don't know. This doesn't look so great. Piper's more skeptical, which I don't know. I can't tell if that's because she's a girl and like sort of impervious to like the charms of this lady, or because she's like a child of Aphrodite and understands how charm speak works. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that, especially with like what is happening, because I have a feeling that because we're so used to the idea now of charm speaking that if we have a character that's just speaking to them and they're going they're just charm speaking.
You have a character who's like kind of charming who is speaking, you're like, oh, you're doing charm speak. It's like, no, I'm just very gregarious and charming. It's just my personality. I'm not trying to intentionally trick you.
B, didn't you know Charles Manson was a son of Aphrodite? Oh, actually, that would make too much sense.
No, it wouldn't, because his face didn't fit the stereotype.
Oh no. Oh.
Yeah, he would have a better sort of aesthetic going on. Actually, do you know who would make sense as a child of Aphrodite would be Ted Bundy.
Yeah, dang it. I was about to say that, B.
Because he's more of that kind of archetype, which, there's like a big potential
and
for
Jeffrey
like...
Dahmer.
Yeah. Okay, we're talking about way too many serial killers, but there is like a big potential for like murderers and stuff who to be child of Aphrodite and like use their ability to charm people to like trick them out of things. I mean, Piper stole a car, so like anything's possible. The moral implications of that I didn't really think through.
If you have this power, you can easily abuse it in many, many ways. And you know what? Because there's no consequences, really, because as we look at this as a very gray morality, like, you could do pretty much anything. And I don't think they're going to have, like, the Greek police are going to come in and be like, hey, stop doing that. I think that's more of like you just become more monstrous as it occurs. So who knows what's going to happen? We'll figure that out. All we know is that they're gonna go shopping and they're gonna get some fun clothing, and then I'm gonna make a bunch of like How I Met Your Mother jokes, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Next chapter.
I don't know. This doesn't bode well. I'm kind of surprised that Jason is so quick to be like, "You're fine. It's fine. You're nice." Yeah, I wonder if it really is just like Piper knowing how charm speak works, or she's just like, you're just being a dumb guy who's like, she's pretty and nice to you, and you're like, okay, this is safe. Like, I don't know.
We will see what's going to be happening because, oh man, do bad things happen. They're going to get stuck into a trap.
So I guess if they're trying to get back Coach Head, she's probably going to like ask for some horrible price in return. Like, okay, then I will take Piper as a person or something. Yeah, like trade in like a human being, because that's kind of what I'm feeling like they're leading up to. Or who knows, she's probably just gonna like trick them and capture them all in a cage and be like, here's some nice juicy demigods to sell to people. So not great.
So B, where can they find you on the old social medias?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
And if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Suda41, that's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. We also have a Patreon /RadioCampHalfblood. We also have t-shirts available at TeePublic, so go to www.teepublic.com, and that's pretty much where you can find all this stuff. It's awesome. Well, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And let's keep staying immortal, everybody. See ya.
Bye, guys.